eventually this bloke turns around to me and he says, if you don't bring the money in here, he said, this tiny knife shop of his, he said, the only way you will get out of here is with 6 of those in your back. And he meant it. He really, really meant it. Not long after that, I ended up with a little bit of a confrontation. The door kind of flies open, and there is this man who's got really twitchy. He sees me, and the first thing he does, goes boom, and stabs me right in the Gregory.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If Kevin or the people around him are watching this, what would you say to him?
You're going to get caught. You know, credit where it's due. 16 years on the run. Yeah, I somewhat begrudgingly doff my cap to you.
Yeah.
And that's where it ends. You need to stand in a court and answer the allegations that are made against you.
Peter Bleksley, thank you so much for joining me on the sit down today, mate. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, I'm very pleased that I got into this shirt this evening because about a month ago, like so many people, I had put on like a shocking amount of weight during lockdown.
Yeah.
And it was just getting out of hand. I've got my 2 teenage sons living at home at the moment. They've been ripping into me mercilessly about the size of my beer gut. My wife has been shedding weight. And yeah, essentially, you know, it really was becoming an issue. I was like getting indigestion and this gut that I was looking at, it was just unsightly. So
Yeah.
I've been walking about 90 to 100,000 steps a week.
Right, okay, cool.
But I mean, really walking, you know what I mean? Boots on, head down, get on with it,
Yeah.
work up a sweat. And consequently, I can get into this shirt, so I'm going to celebrate that fact this evening.
Looking better than ever, Peter. I mean, I've only met you this once, but you're looking brilliant.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
So, by the way, I wanted to start with that question, how are you? And I mean, I'm not going to lie, I start that with everyone, but I think I was watching Roman Kemp, I don't know if you're aware of him, Roman Kemp from Capital Radio. He's started this, or I think he's released now, a documentary on mental health and stuff like that. I think it's called Our Silent Emergency. Long story short, he lost his mate a year ago to mental health and suicide, and so he was saying in that documentary that the most important part of a conversation is are you okay? But for some reason in our society at the moment, that's the least important part of our conversation, isn't it? You say, you're right, pal, yeah, not bad, anyway, what you doing later? Whereas actually, are you all right is actually really important. So Peter, again, are you all right? How are you getting on, genuinely?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine, thank you. And of course, I've had my mental health issues in my life. I've been hospitalised twice when I've had, you know, my mental health has collapsed. And I think, picking up on the point you've said, I don't know whether it's Roman or somebody else, but they're trying to get us to reinforce that, how are you, by kind of asking it twice, because it's become such a simple throwaway line. Yeah, say it with meaning and inquire. So thank you very much. I really do appreciate that. In fact, this morning I was watching BBC Breakfast while I was having my Weetabix. Other breakfast cereals are available. And and there was a tragic, deeply moving piece about a young man who'd committed suicide. And they were interviewing his dad, and it was very powerful. His father was heroic in this interview that he gave. And I immediately went onto Twitter and Facebook, and I posted a story about me across a 2-tweet thread of when I had stood in my loft, 5 paces from where I'm sitting now, with one rope tied around the rafter of the roof and the other end of the rope around my neck. And I was looking through the loft hatch, which of course was open, and contemplating jumping and ending my life. I didn't, thankfully. mainly at the time, my thinking was, because my two youngest boys were only pups, they were real youngsters, and the thought of my wife and the kids coming in and experiencing that sight was what reined me back, and I thought I'll kill myself somewhere else. Um, Thankfully, due to the brilliance of the staff in the NHS, medication, and I still take a tiny dose, a maintenance dose of medication to this day, and I've really got no problem with it. In fact, I embrace it, and it's something that I do. Talking to people and the love of those near to me, I'm still here, living life to the absolute full. Thank you. I've probably never had a more fulfilling, challenging life, and so mental health is an absolute passion of mine. I posted it this morning. I've had some great engagement because, suicide is a word with so much stigma around it that people kind of shy away from. And I really want us all, especially us blokey kind of blokes,
Yeah.
you know what?
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, to talk about it and think about how you are primarily. I saw a great phrase about mental health the other day. You've got to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
I thought that was wonderful. I can't claim it. But it's great. Yeah, make sure that your own mental health is robust as well. And then reach out and look after your mates. I've helped a couple of mates during lockdown who have had their struggles.
Yeah, I think that's, again, when I was planning this interview, I was like, where should I start? Let's start with the undercover stuff. Let's start with the detective. Kevin Parle, let's go straight into that. But literally just before, maybe 20 minutes before starting, I thought, you know what? I always ask them how they are, and I never actually really, genuinely, shockingly, I'm actually that interested. Let's get on to the undercover stuff. But, looking you up and researching you and knowing about your mental health in the past, and then this documentary from Roman as well. And as you said, we're two blokes. It's just really important to ask each other how you're getting on, isn't it? Because I think that's, it's such an important thing.
I'm going to consciously try and mix up that "how are you" opening line when I see people. Because, for example, when we get back down to the cricket club, which I hope will be in the not too distant future, and we're standing on the boundary, I'm with all the other dads. All right, most of them are younger than me, so and so's, but there you go. So I'm going to mix it up. And I might make it "how you feeling."
Yeah.
Are you actually okay? How has lockdown been for your mental health? And I know some blokes will be like, they might be a bit taken back by it, but it'll be a good insight for me into what their responses are and whether they're actually looking for someone to reach out to.
Yeah. Sometimes maybe if they particularly really extremely close off, that might give you certain indications that, that might be as good as them telling you that, oh, I'm not doing very well. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think it's important. In regards to, you can decide to how much you want to speak about it or not. In regards to your mental health, obviously, you, as you said, you were hospitalised twice, and you take medication and stuff like that. Is that just a chemical thing in your brain, or is that influenced by the circumstances of working undercover and seeing these sorts of things?
Yeah, I must make it clear that I am not medically trained in any way. I'm not a counsellor. I'm not professional. But all my experience comes out of many, many years of mental health challenges and two periods in hospital. The first one was back in the mid-1990s, and that was a result of me living in the witness protection program for 2 years, which was particularly traumatic. I was conspiracy theorising all the time because a report had my real name put in it when it shouldn't have done. It was printed off, taken out of a police building, which it shouldn't have done. It was in the back of an unmarked car. It shouldn't have been there. That car, guess what, got stolen, and the report got stolen, and there was already a threat to kill me. And so if they'd matched the two up, I was in grave danger. And so I ended up being parachuted overnight into witness protection. So I no longer lived in a home. I lived in a hideout. And so I was conspiracy theorising all the time. I was dreading bumping into my neighbours because they were going to say, "Oh, what's your name and where do you come from and what do you do for a living?" Well, that had been quite a conversation, and I had all these pressures, and I didn't help myself because I drank too much and I smoked too much. So, I'm not saying that it was everybody else's fault. I did play a part in my own downfall. self-medicating with alcohol is really not a great idea, believe you me.
Yeah.
And that culminated with me having a dreadful, complete meltdown. Essentially, yes, a chemical imbalance in the brain, as the psychiatrists and the nurses told me. That is what had happened. All the stresses and the strains had created that imbalance. So then I became progressively more and more unwell, extremely paranoid. I used to read messages into number plates. Now, because I was a cop, right, and because I'd spent years and years taking great notice of number plates, particularly when you're on surveillance and when I was working undercover trying to clock a number plate that I might have seen. Obviously, couldn't write it down, officer, because you're undercover, but locking it away, and thinking, can I, pass that on to the investigating team? All that kind of stuff. So I had paid far more attention to number plates than the man in the street. And as I got more and more unwell and paranoid, I used to read messages into the configurations of the number plates. And I could make a message out of any number plate you put in front of me. I really could. I could have configured it as being a hidden, secretive message. And of course, that, again, needless to say, was a major symptom of me being so unwell. And then I would really analyse everything that people said. I would never take anything that somebody said as face value. I was always looking for a secret subtext to what they were saying. This was driven by my paranoia. And so, things like that. And there were other examples, but as you can imagine, it weighs you down, it breaks you down, and it just dismantles your mental health.
Yeah. So for the people that don't know then, how did you get to the point where you needed to get put into witness protection?
Okay, well, at the age of 25, having been in the police for 7 years at that stage, so firstly in uniform, then a stint as a detective, then I wanted to be a Scotland Yard detective because it's great on your CV. Scotland Yard is renowned across the world in law enforcement circles. And at the age of 25, I was fortunate enough to be selected and go on what then was called the Central Drug Squad. So I'm fit, I'm fearless, I pull my shoulders back, puff my chest out, and walk through the revolving doors at New Scotland Yard thinking, this is it. And to a large extent, it was. It was incredibly exciting work. It was what I wanted to do, surveillance, undercover, serious and organised crime, smashing doors down, pointing my gun at people's heads, telling them to get out of their beds, slapping the handcuffs on, boys' own stuff, if that's what, floats your boat. Not long after I got to the yard, I saw how the undercover cops were operating. I thought, I can do that. And actually, I reckon I might be able to do it a bit better than some of the current operatives. I volunteered for that. It was a very unsophisticated world in those days. There was no selection process, no designated recruitment to go through, no training. You flew by the seat of your pants. But I was good at it, and there were a few others that were very good at it. And then the squad kind of got formed. The undercover unit got formed because there was a need for centralisation of expertise and all the stuff I mentioned beforehand, and facilities like our passports, credit cards, birth certificates, all these kind of documents that we needed to support our false identities. We had a pool of vehicles, expertise, and all of that. It galloped forward massively. And after working undercover for 10 years, I got involved in a major drugs operation where we bought £4 million worth of heroin from some serious gangsters with terrorism links. They delivered the drugs to me in a hotel. I weighed and tested them all. I got arrested at gunpoint. So did the bad guy, all as part of the kind of the facade, the story, if you will. And then the bad guys worked out, not surprisingly, because they had a lot of time in prison awaiting their trial to figure out how it had all gone wrong. And they worked on the theory that I must have been an undercover cop, and they were right. And they then decided that if they killed me, they'd kill the evidence. And to an extent, they might have been right there as well. It was a very complex operation. It had involved the FBI, in the States, the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency in the States, the Garda Síochána, the Irish police, what was then called Her Majesty's Customs and Excise, HMRC now, and other agencies and other bodies, and there'd been a lot of infighting, none of which I knew about, because I essentially am that gun for hire. You know, I go from undercover job to undercover job.
Yeah.
When it comes in, if it falls within my expertise, I go off and do it. I don't need to know about the politicking and the infighting and all of that. So this job went not exactly smoothly as far as all the background stuff was concerned. And one of the officers from the investigating team had been told to compile a report about everything that had gone on for the benefit of the deputy commissioner, who was going to go in and fight the corner of the police against, with customs, FBI, the spooks, the security services. They were involved in it as well. Major kind of operation. And then it was that report that had my real name in it instead of my code number that bizarrely got stolen from an unmarked car when a bloke went shopping on the way home. Yeah,
comedy of errors, isn't it?
Well, or comedy of conspiracy, but not a very funny comedy for me, because it meant I had to move into witness protection and live every day of my life in fear of the assassin's bullet or the bomb under my car.
What effect did that have on you and your on your family? Because did they go with you into witness protection? Did you have the kids at the time?
My first son was born out of wedlock. Okay,
right. Okay.
He's now 33. Me and him have always been close. I was never a weekend burger dad. My commitment to him was unshakable, largely born out of the fact that my dad had abandoned me. I think, I really didn't want history to repeat itself. So that was very problematic, because when I went into witness protection, he was 5, I think. And so meeting him was very difficult in the early days. And of course, it was something that I wasn't going to compromise on. I don't care, I'd have rather had the bullet in the back of my head than not see my child.
Yeah.
So in the end, I kind of overruled a bit of what the bosses were saying, because having him in my life was the single most important thing. I was living with a girlfriend at the time, and she decided to come with me into witness protection. She was given the option, obviously, but we didn't have a joint mortgage. None of the bills were paid together. So in theory, bearing in mind this is a sort of pre-digital internet age, there wasn't any way of linking her to me. If somebody corrupt in a bank or in the police had had access to the records that existed then, she wouldn't have been able to be linked to me. So that minimised the risk to her. She said she was coming with me, and sadly, tragically, and it is still a matter of huge regret, she witnessed and was the end of my breakdown and me becoming, a dreadful person to live with. And she stuck it out for as long as she could, and then it became all too much to her. It took a toll on her mental health as well, and we split. I found out, in subsequent years that she met and married and had a family, and those things are some comfort to me. But what that young lady was put through, by me, was and remains a matter of regret.
Yeah. Do you have many regrets throughout your life and your career?
No, not really. I live my life looking forwards now and not backwards, because for those 2 years in witness protection, I lived my life looking over my shoulder in continual fear. And that's very damaging. Yeah, and draining and exhausting and all of that. So no, I live my life looking forward. I am a sickeningly optimistic kind of bloke. I always believe that no matter how hard it's raining, the sun's going to come out at some point. And that is what fires me through. I'm very lucky. I've got a family that adore me. I've got a close-knit circle of great friends. I don't think you need to have hundreds of friends. I used to think I had all the friends in the world. But then when things go wrong, and you
Yeah.
find yourself in a lock-in psychiatric ward, you find out who your real friends are.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny you say that. Actually, I've been going through a bit of a tough time recently, and I think that's very true. How tough times make you realise who around you really is, does care for you, because they are the one to drop you a text and say, "I'm always here" on the end of a phone if you fancy it, pal. As opposed to the others that you thought were really in your life, who actually have sort of gone away a little bit and not really got in touch as much or been as responsive to any contact. So I think that's very true. Being held in witness protection, you said you were for 2 years.
Yeah.
What? How do you come out of that? Was it one day where they went, "Oh, you're all right now. There's no more threat"? When did the threat sort of end? What was that process like?
Well, of course, I left witness protection via that lock-in psychiatric ward.
Yeah,
Because I was so catastrophically ill. And the psychiatrist from the NHS, who was a brilliant man, said to me, "Peter, if you're going to get well and stay well, you have to be Peter Bleksley. You have been too many different people for too long. You've got to be yourself and stay yourself." So, of course, I couldn't go back to that witness protection. I had to take and swallow an element of risk, shall we say, and begin to live my life once again as me. That was crucial. So I never went back to witness protection. I moved in with a mate of mine and his girlfriend. When I came out of hospital, they were willing to look after me, even though I was far from well. This wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't all sorted out, and I didn't bounce back to normality after 3.5 weeks in hospital. It took months and months, and it's my mental health is something that I'm always on red alert to, and so it took a long time. But yeah, so that to that extent, I didn't really have a choice in the matter.
Yeah, and you didn't go back into other undercover work after that, did you?
No, I didn't. That was the end of my undercover career. I did carry on and do some surveillance, because that's plain clothes more rather than undercover. So I did some of that, but essentially, round about 1998, I'd been on Scotland Yard squads for so long, they decided that they were going to bounce me back to a police station. And I got posted to Orpington police station. And I was so stigmatized. My reputation preceded me. The whispers, the people turning away, the fact that I couldn't access computers because I never got passwords, or if I did, they didn't work, and all that kind of stuff, and the pretty shabby way I was being treated started to take a toll on my mental health again. And one night I drove out of that police station. By this time, I'd married my wife, who I'm still with, over a quarter of a century later. And I was driving out of the police station, and the whites of my knuckles were so bright that they were kind of like creating a glare. And I gripped this steering wheel. I thought I was going to rip it off. I just pointed the car home, got it home, let go of the steering wheel, walked in and said to my wife, "I'm getting ill again. This is taking its toll. I cannot run the risk." And she said, "Doctor, tomorrow you ain't going back." And then soon afterwards, I was medically retired from the police.
Well, thank God you had that self-awareness to be able to recognize the fact that you were getting ill again, right? And that you had the ability to therefore speak out about it, because those two things, I think, again, I'm no expert on it, but I feel like from research and listening to people speak, those two things, like self-recognition and understanding yourself and your mental health, and two, being able to speak out about it, they're two fundamental stages that I think people struggle with. So the fact that you were able to do those things both is a great thing, I guess, right?
Yeah, and admit to it. I was one of the most roughy-tufty kind of blokes you could have imagined. I was always first through the door. If you watch a modern cop documentary, you will see that the person that smashes the door in then steps aside and others go through.
Yeah.
Sod that in my day, right? I was going to put the door in, and I was going to be first through it as well, right? No one else was getting in there before me because I'll have the bundle, you know. I'll point my gun at them. I'll do all of that. So I was typically one of those blokes. You know, I was an immature womanizer, hard drinking, partying, dancing, laughing, football. I still go to football every week. Well, I will as soon as we can. You know, I was that archetypal roughy-tufty bloke. And so consequently, I think people thought, I couldn't have a mental health breakdown. You know, people thought I was kind of invincible. In fact, one very senior police officer, when I was in hospital, went to my mum's house, okay, and my dear old mum is still with us, bless her, and he said, I think Peter just needs a kick up the arse. I'm chronically ill in a psychiatric ward, and that's their attitude. Another police officer went to my local pub, right, and my best man ran the boozer, right, and went in there getting a drink, you know, all kind of trying to be somewhat covert, and said to him, Bleksley's putting it on, isn't he? Bleksley's putting this on. You know, that's how much they were unsympathetic to my illness and wanted to undermine it and were trying to make me out to be some kind of fraud. So all those factors, times have moved on, of course they have, thankfully, for many, many people. So, you know, no matter how big you are, no matter how much you can bench press and all that kind of stuff, everyone has mental health. It's just that sometimes many of us have mental health issues. So it doesn't matter the size of you, the shape of you, the background of you. Be self-aware. And you know what? It's a really, really kind of sensible, stand-up, courageous thing to do, to say to someone, I'm struggling. I'm not okay.
Yep, 100%. Well, if we go back to your days where you were this first through the door, bashing the door down, gun in the face kind of guy, I'm sure if you find Kevin Parle, then you might revert at some point. But if we go back then, what sort of police officer were you? Because we had Neil Woods on as well, and who I know you are a big fan of, and his sort of drug law reform campaigns and stuff like that, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But Neil Woods, I can't imagine Neil Woods was the same, like that was just straight through the door. I can imagine Neil Woods being a little bit more sneaky about things, a little bit more cunning about stuff. Were you, what sort of undercover police officer were you?
I think Neil Woods is more thoughtful about everything more than I am, right? He's one of my heroes, that man. He's the granddaddy of drug law reform, certainly in terms of people that used to be in law enforcement. He's a man that I respect immensely. Yeah, he's a top fella. I was always a bit of a crash bang wallet merchant.
I'm a bit the same.
I bulldozed my way through life, and to an extent, I still do. Not quite in the style of me when I was 30, but I loved the cut and thrust. I loved the excitement, the screeching tyres, the 90 mile an hour, and then the going undercover and convincing career criminals who, they were born and raised into criminality. And there I am convincing them that I'm one of them, and they're falling for it. It was a buzz. I mean, it was terrifying a lot of the time, absolutely terrifying, because some of these people were dangerous.
What's the most terrified you've ever been?
Oh, well, on a number of occasions, I was.
I'm here all day. Peter.
Right. Okay. Believe it or not, back in the day, you could have what was called a knife shop, right?
Right. Okay.
I kid you not. Before more recent legislation came in around the sale and possession of bladed instruments and all of that. So I'm in North London. I'm buying a parcel of cannabis, about 40 or 50 grand's worth of cannabis.
Okay, this is an undercover police officer, not just in your spare time.
No. Yes, believe you me. Yeah. If I'd have had 40 or 50 grand in the holder, well, I wouldn't have been in the old bill, would I? Right? Right? So I'm in this shop, and the geezer who I'm negotiating with is enormous, right?
Yeah.
And he's is scary. This bloke is seriously scary. He's got a shaven head, which were far less common in those days than they are now. And he runs this shop, and behind him, he has got machetes, swords, hunting knives, you name it, displayed all over the back wall behind him. I'm in there negotiating with him for hours. Surrounded, he's got a little team, and they've positioned themselves either side of me.
And you're on your own.
So it's well, I've got my mate who's parked a few streets down the road with 40 grand in the boot, right? So it's all a bit kind of tense. Anyway, I take one of his henchmen out to see the money in the back of the car. We were smart about it. We didn't put ourselves in a position where we could be robbed. We whiz him round the block and disorientate him a bit, make sure we're not being followed, show him the money, right? And then, I take him back to the shop and I said, right, your mate has seen the money, so I'm good for it. Now, where's the gear? Anyway, believe it or not, I get taken out and I get to see the gear in a boot of a car. Now, we've got a surveillance team deployed, and I am hoping that they are seeing me seeing the gear. Anyway, I then get dragged back into the shop. And what became a sticking point was that he wanted the money to be bought into that shop. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, I was not going to do that under any circumstances because I could be, robbed, essentially. And the commissioner didn't take lightly to having large lumps of his money being robbed. And the negotiations are getting really very kind of tense. And eventually this bloke turns around to me and he says, if you don't bring the money in here, he said, this tiny knife shop of his, he said, the only way you will get out of here is with 6 of those in your back. And he's pointing to all the knives and the swords and machetes that are on the wall. And he meant it. He really, really meant it. And he kept me there for hours. Essentially, I was being held hostage. I knew he was perfectly capable of carrying out his threat. So I got on the phone and I rang my mate who's sitting in the car with our cash. And I said to him, okay, mate. And he's like, how's it going? Yeah, fine. Yeah, it's all good. I said, okay, bring the money to the shop now, please. Bring the money. And he's like, now, he knows that I would never, ever ask him to do that. And he's gone like, you sure? I've gone, yeah, bring the money here. How long are you going to be? He said, about 10 minutes. I said, oh, yeah, great. By the way, I said, don't forget, it's Jackie's birthday tomorrow. So make sure you pick a card up for her, will you? He goes, yeah, okay, mate, no problem. Boom. Of course, Jackie's birthday is code for my life is in danger. And it's the only time in my undercover career I ever used code to say my life is in danger. So I'm there and the bloke's going, how long are you going to be? How long are you going to be? I said, 10 minutes or so. And I'm standing there. I know that the front door is locked and bolted. The back door is locked and bolted. There's his people either side of me. This is really not a great situation.
No.
And then what seemed like an eternity, but was only a few minutes later, the whole front of his shop just disappeared, right? As my colleagues absolutely mullered it and took it apart. And a great and late friend and colleague of mine, Chris Hardy, rest his soul, I shall never forget him coming first through there, because he was the first thing, because when it all disappears, obviously I don't want glass in my boat and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I've then turned around and Chris Hardy just made a beeline for me, right? Boom, wrapped his arms around me and unceremoniously dragged me out of there. And I think that was probably, as close as it got. But there were many other similar, frankly, terrifying kind of situations.
Were you lucky that Chris got to you before they did?
Well, they, of course, all went into a bit of panic mode because the noise was like deafening. They just, they took the frame out, the door out, the windows out, the lot. They just smashed the whole lot of it to absolute smithereens. So that was the whole surprise element. So, and I think they were probably more concerned in scarpering, trying to scarper and that kind of stuff and get out the back and blah, blah, blah. But Chris had no eyes for any of them. All he wanted to do was get his old mate out, and I will never, ever forget him for that.
Is that more scary than being stabbed in the neck, Peter? Or like?
Yeah. That wasn't a particularly pleasant experience. I think I've still got. You can still see the scar there.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
Yeah, that wasn't great. I wasn't working undercover. I was in plain clothes, right? So I was part of the sort of investigating and attack team for some other cops that were working undercover. And what happened was there was a new detective inspector on the team. It wasn't our team's job. It was another team. It was their investigation. And one of the senior bosses at the yard got hold of me and he said, "Look, Blex, this DI's new. It's an undercover job. Will you go and just keep an eye on him and lend him your experience and all that kind of stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I will, Governor. Yeah. Overtime, lovely, thank you. I'll have that." It's the job. They have an expression. I don't know if they still got it, but back in my day, it was called job pissed, right? And that was for anybody that was literally drunk on the job, got drunk on the highs of the job, and that was me. So I'm like, yeah, sure, off we go. Cops and robbers and all that. Never say no to that. So it's in Tooting in southeast London, and the trade goes down in a supermarket car park. So one or two of the bad guys bring, I think it was a kilo or a couple of kilos of heroin. I can't remember how much it was now. They bring the heroin onto the plot. The undercover cop gives a signal. The bad guys get arrested. The undercover cops can hopefully escape. Job done. But what we'd done during the surveillance is we'd noticed these guys to-ing and fro-ing from a flat, which was above a shop. And it had a metal staircase leading up to the front door of the flat, which was at the back of these premises. So we knew that those premises were highly relevant to the investigation. More than likely, the gear came from those premises. So we've watched this during the surveillance and all of that. So when the arrest goes down, I get hold of this new DI and I said, "Governor, we've got to hit that address now. Like now." And he's going, "Oh, well, let's just wait. We can't wait and see. We've got to hit it now." Because, of course, I'm thinking there's a bloke inside there who's probably expecting to get 20, 30, 40, 50 grand very soon, and his mates to come back with that 50 grand. And when that's not happened, he's going to start getting a bit jittery, isn't he?
Yeah, twitching.
Yeah. So we've got to go now. Anyway, this new DI, who turned out to be a good operator in the end, he got the hang of it. But, he didn't. And he didn't give me permission to go and check out the door till about 15, 20 minutes after the arrests had been made.
And that's a long time in this sort of circumstance, isn't it?
Very long time. So I go up there and I'm checking the door because you need to know, is it steel reinforced frame? Have we got to, can we smash it out? Have we got to drill it out? Have we got to blow it out? What have we got to do? And not long after that, I ended up with a little bit of a confrontation. The door kind of flies open and there is this man who's got really twitchy. He sees me and the first thing he does, go boom, and stabs me right in the Gregory, which was not a very pleasant experience. I'll tell you what, the first thing though, because it all happened so quickly, and he hit me with such force that I thought I'd been stabbed with a light bulb. I thought I'd been hit with a light bulb. I don't know why, and I can't explain it to this day. But anyway, so as he's come at me and he's kind of, gone in there, I've grabbed him. Bearing in mind, I'm the Metropolitan Police's light heavyweight boxing representative, so I could shift some furniture back in the day, right? Yeah. So I've grabbed him and I've pinned him over the railings that were by the steps and the platform that led to his flat, and I've got both his wrists because remember, it's the hands that'll kill you, right?
Yeah.
And of course, in one hand, he is holding this knife with blood on it, and I'm going, that's my blood, isn't it?
Oh shit.
You know, and I've been stabbed in the neck, and this really isn't very good. So colleagues came up the stairs, they took him from me. Another officer came up and could see that I was bleeding, got a scarf, wrapped it down around my neck. The big scream up goes, get an ambulance, get an ambulance. I get led down the stairs, and
at this point, were you thinking this could be really bad here, or were you in that shock at the moment? Or?
I've been stabbed in the bloody neck. You know, I'm thinking this really is not good. And of course, I was terrified of breathing deeply because I'm thinking I'm going to inhale my own blood and die here. If you know, I was thinking that is a distinct possibility. So I was breathing in very, very shallow breaths, which again is probably not good because you're not getting the oxygen you need, you know, but I didn't want to be choking on my own blood. So I get led down to pavement level, scarf round my neck, sat down. One of the police officers, a female detective, brilliant operator, she's kind of like, you know, saying, you're going to be all right, Blex, you know, you'll be okay, just keeping me calm and all of that. I can hear the ambulance coming as the old two-tones are getting closer and closer and closer and closer. Paramedics didn't want to remove the scarf, right? They just said, no, keep it there. They've wrapped bandages around it. They've got me in the back of the ambulance. Blue lights and two-tones to St George's Hospital. Rushed into A&E, and they're literally running. The paramedics are running, and I'm like laid out on the, you know, stretcher on wheels. Straight into A&E. A very tall and distinguished-looking lady, who was the A&E consultant, comes straight over to me, removes the bandaging, removes the scarf, takes one look at it. She goes, flesh wound, few stitches, he'll be fine. Oh, wonderful.
The relief.
Wonderful, the relief. Yeah. And she was so kind of like unsentimental, businesslike, professional, you know, flesh wound, few stitches, almost like I felt like, oh, I'm so sorry. Have I made a bit of a fuss here? You know, like, you know, I didn't know how bad it was.
Yeah,
you know, cleaned it up, stitched me up, and then I went back to they took me back to the Nick. I had to be photographed. Back in the old days, you had police photographers that would come out and photograph your wounds and all of that. Got a lift home. Yeah. And then the bosses rang the following morning. They told me to stay off work for, I think, 3 days or whatever it was.
3 days, yeah.
But I mean, the following morning, my whole neck was black because of the bruising came out and all of that. And there was a graze on my chin because he's obviously hit my chin first as he stabbed me.
Yeah.
And
I might do the whole interview. I might do the whole interview like this. Was that not as terrifying as being held hostage?
Yeah.
I might just do that the whole way through, just for an hour and a half. And was that not as terrifying as this?
Yeah.
Did you get held hostage then? Because I saw that you mentioned that, but I don't think you went into it on the podcast.
But yeah, that was a man in the knife shop. He literally would not.
Oh, that was that one.
You know, and that was it.
Right.
I was his hostage until the money got brought in. Yeah.
Christ, yeah. Is that when you got stabbed? Is that the biggest bust to have gone wrong? Is that one of the big wrong mishaps in your time in the police?
Yeah, to say it's gone wrong, they're difficult situations. You know, these bad guys never read the script, so things are always flexible, which is why, you know, back in the day we had to think on our feet, have kind of flexibility of thought, because these operations are built on shifting sands that are forever changing and moving and taking on a different character. So, of course, from time to time, things go wrong. You know, we're talking about, particularly with regards to the drugs industry, you know, violence is a currency in that industry. You know, you can't settle things in the small claims court or sue somebody in the high court if you've got a dispute in the drugs industry. You have to resort to violence. And sadly, people do, which is why it costs so many lives. And so many of us, back in the day, who were involved in drugs investigations got hurt. You know, I had guns pointed at me. You know, a mate of mine got shot through the heart and survived.
Wow.
You know, and another mate of mine on our squad got thrown down a flight of stairs.
Mm.
You know, violence was almost
Part and parcel of it.
Yeah, part and parcel, and unfortunately, an ever present. I suspect now the cops have things like risk assessments. You know, we didn't have risk assessments back in my day. That expression hadn't been invented, and as I say, we just made it up as we went along.
Yeah, you talk about in research for this interview, I've seen a lot of your stuff, and you talk a lot about how there were simpler times policing back in the day. But when it comes to sort of obviously moving on from that undercover bit, hunting people that are trying to evade the police, essentially fugitives, with the internet and stuff like that, do you think it would be an easier gig now than back in the day?
It's a completely different kind of landscape. I mean, when I was involved in hunting fugitives as a cop, you know, and I'm talking about the 80s and the 90s, the pre-internet age, I think it was easier.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because policing was easier. You know, back in my day, if you joined the police, generally speaking, it was cops and robbers, good guys and bad guys. I mean, there were beat police officers, of course, which are hugely missed, I think. And the generally speaking, neighbourhood policing has been under-resourced and neglected in recent years, and it's a vitally important tool which should be brought back across the board, across all police forces. I think it was easier. That's not to say we lived in a crime-free nirvana back then. Of course we didn't. People committed crime. But the policing was not about being the answer to everybody's ills. You know, we didn't get 999 calls because somebody had the wrong topping on their pizza. Right? You know, that kind of nonsense didn't happen. And of course, we weren't a one-stop shop for all of society's ills, which the police have become in recent years. So frontline cops have my utter respect and to an extent, considerable sympathy, because they have to pick up the pieces of everything these days. And in my day, if all you wanted to do was go out there and nick people for committing crime, you could do that. That was allowed.
Yeah. In regards to hunting fugitives then, what's the process of it like? Obviously, we've seen you on Hunted, Channel 4. We understand a little bit of the process that you go through there. But let's say you get information. There's been a murder. Where do you go from there?
Start at the beginning. I mean, now, I'm not contemporary. I left the cops a long time ago, but the essential first steps are the same now as they were then, which is start at the beginning, focus on the scene. You know, the scene will so often give up its secrets, especially today in the age of DNA and forensic science, which has galloped on immeasurably from back in my day. If we got a fingerprint in my day, that was the height of forensic science. And now, of course, with DNA, because of the brilliance of the scientists, it opens up a completely different world. And the crime scene investigators who are professionals with such an astonishing level of expertise and training. So crime scenes give up their secrets. Not always, but a lot of the time. And that will so often give you so much. But again, that crime scene, you have to pan out from where you may have found the body. What else are you going to find out there? Can you do that old school shoe leather detective work and go knocking on people's doors? Did you see or hear anything? In other words, reaching out for witnesses.
Yeah. Is that in movies and stuff? I when I was preparing, I called it the Sherlock Holmes moment, right? So in movies, you almost see the detective, the chief detective or something like that, and he's like, He's put two and two together in his mind all of a sudden. He's realised it's the fella from around the corner that's done it. Or something like that. Do you know what I mean? It's this eureka moment. Is that an accurate depiction of real life, or is it more strategic than that? And if it is an accurate depiction, is there a strategy to get to that point, or is that just instinct, and that's the fact that you're good at the job?
There's a great word which you don't hear much these days in policing, but I love it. And it's called a hunch. A copper's hunch. Or a copper's nose, people used to describe it as. And you just have that nose for sniffing something out. And I'm not talking about a Grandma Charlie here, right? That hunch where, and that still exists today, but you don't see a lot of it because there have been two brilliant TV documentaries on this week about detective work. And you don't see the coppers having those light bulb moments in contemporary documentaries because they want to show very much an A to Z step by step of how they've got there. Excuse me. But you can guarantee that at some point, somebody on that investigating team has gone, have we looked at this? Have we considered that? And you know what? I think that so-and-so, so-and-so. But they're going to be off-camera moments. But you know, accept like nothing, believe no one, and check everything. The old ABC still applies. But there are, believe you me, there are detectives today that still have that hunch, albeit that word and those moments we don't get to see and hear about.
I'm always just so fascinated as to how they get there, because I watch these, I think when we're watching these true crime documentaries or even fictional bits and bobs where you're like, you almost imagine yourself to be that chief guy, which you actually were, but you were that detective and you're imagining yourself, but I think I would have never checked under the bar stool over there or something like that. I mean, I would have never done that, but is that just something that comes to you? I guess that's something in you, isn't it?
Any detective worth their salt knows that the devil resides in the detail.
Right.
It's the detail that counts. It's the things that they've overlooked that detectives don't. That's what eventually brings about their downfall. They think they've covered their tracks. They may have plotted and planned a crime for years, if not decades. They think they've carried out the perfect murder. But you know what? That's them on their own or with their cronies planning some sort of crime. When a team of 30-odd detectives who are professionals to the bottom of their boots look at it, listen, learn, analyse, contemplate and decide, they'll find the thing that the bad guys simply overlooked.
Yeah. I heard a thing once, it said the bad guys or criminals have to get it right every time. The coppers only have to get it right once.
Well, that phrase stemmed from a dark time in British history when the IRA...
Oh, I just referred to something dodgy.
No. That phrase actually came into being. It was used by the IRA, who, when they were carrying out their bombing campaigns in the UK, on one notable occasion, said that the police had got lucky, and then said the police have to get lucky all the time. We only have to get lucky once in terms of them being able to let a bomb off. And of course, it's ended up being flipped now. In so much as and becoming the version that you've just said.
Yeah. I'm fascinated, and this might be dodgy, right? But I think we all have our little things. Some people might love murder mystery documentaries or whatever. Something I love, and I'm this should not be taken out of context. I love watching documentaries or movies to do with like kidnappings and like paedophiles and stuff like that. I can't get enough of this Chris Hansen in America. He's done the old, what's it called now? To Catch a Predator. Oh. Little things like that. Or there's a movie called 3096 Days, I think, about, what's her name now? Someone that went missing, a girl that went missing in Austria. Natasha Kampusch, she was called. And little things like that. I can't get enough of it. Have you had to work on those kidnapping cases, like pedo cases or anything like that?
No, I never worked on any paedophile cases, but I have quite a bit of knowledge about it because my wife spent the overwhelming bulk of her police career, which was over 30 years in the cops. She spent the vast majority of her career dealing with child protection issues and catching child sex offenders and all of that. So when she came home from the end of a challenging day's work and wanted to offload, I would get to hear about it. And, you know, she was a brilliant public servant, and many people were made a lot safer as a result of her work. And a lot of very bad people also went to jail as a result of her work. But it was never anything I ever did. I was always, you know, cops and robbers, muck and bullets, and that kind of stuff. And I don't think I'd probably have been. I don't know. I just simply never did any of that work. But building on what you're saying, you know, don't feel ashamed about having a fascination with true crime. True crime is a vast industry these days, whether it be movies, TV, books, or podcasts. I mean, there are so many true crime podcasts.
I think there's a good true crime podcast that I know of, you know.
We might get onto that. And I think you'll find it's better than good. Right? Okay, but I'll let that one go. Right? Okay. It's a huge industry, and I am, of course, I'm a part of it. I do have my concerns about some of it, and now I'm not going to be a party pooper because I love podcasts. I think it's a great medium through which people can connect and find different audiences, and there's something for everyone out there, and I love that. I do have a little concern sometimes because I've spent a lot of time with the relatives of murder victims.
Right.
Okay. You know, one of whom has become a close friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And when you've got as close to somebody like that I have, and there have been others that I've written about in my books, and you realise the catastrophic toll that murder takes on people, the people left behind. It's like dropping a house brick into a bath, you know, the ripples that it creates, and they simply don't go away. And sometimes people dive into these cases and they come up with their theories, and they might not have a lot of expertise to, you know, upon which to base that kind of thinking. Now, I'm not saying don't do it, and I'm not getting all highbrow. Please, I hope that's not what comes across.
No, it doesn't.
But my advice to anybody before they write a blog or create a podcast about a true crime, particularly a murder, is ask yourself, what would the victim's family think of what you are about to write or say? Mm-hmm. That is what that, and I would leave it at that, because, you know, it's all about victims. My life now is about victims. It's all about victims.
We can talk about your life now, and I think it was what occupies your every sort of moment, living breath. I think you were saying, until I die, I will never give up. Looking for the man behind you there, the People's Hunt for Kevin Parle. Talk to us. I mean, I obviously know a lot about it from researching, but for people that don't know, who is Kevin Parle? What's he done, and why are you looking for him?
Okay, in February 2019, I announced that I was leaving the Channel 4 show Hunted. Okay, I'd done 6 series of that. I'd had a great time, met some absolutely wonderful people, some of whom will be friends forever. But in the last series that I was involved in, that was on TV, we caught all the fugitives. Yeah. Boom. What a day that was. It was the result of like 3 or 4 days, very intense investigation, some brilliant investigative work by my team. that culminated in us capturing them all, which wasn't a universally popular thing, by the way. Loads of people took to Twitter and went, fix, oh, and all that kind of malarkey, all that nonsense. Anyway, the time had come for me to bid farewell to hunting. I'd done 6 series. I've been there right from the off. I'd taken it as far as I could, and it was time to move on. My publisher, as I was deciding what my next major project would be, my publisher said, yep, you can write another book, but you've got to get the right subject material. Fairly obvious thing. And I thought, okay, at that stage I'd written 3 books. I've written 3 plays for BBC Radio 4.
You're sounding a little bit more Tunbridge Wells now, Peter.
Don't you know, right? I've consulted on dramas. I've done thousands of interviews and many documentaries and all that. But the bottom line is I am best known for hunting pretend fugitives on an entertainment show, right? Okay, fine. I'm happy with that. It's absolutely fine. But I thought, so combine my skill set and my experience, the network of people that I've got around me, ex-law enforcement, ex-military, those kind of people, and my media contacts, and what I'm best known for, hunting fugitives, just flip it slightly and go and find a real fugitive. And I decided to hunt 6'5", Liverpudlian, Scouser, Kevin Parle, because they do not come more wanted than this bloke.
Yeah.
And so, on the 29th of April, 2019, almost 23 months ago to the day, I held a press conference in London and announced that I was hunting Kevin Parle, who by then had been on the run for over 14 years. Wow. He's now been on the run for 16 years. He is wanted in connection with 2 ghastly murders. Now, I need to make this clear. He has not been convicted of these crimes, but he is very much wanted for both of them. He is on the National Crime Agency's most wanted list. There is a European arrest warrant out for him, and Merseyside police are offering a £20,000 reward for information that leads to his capture. His capture only. That reward used to be subject to capture and conviction, but I've argued long and hard that that conviction side of it is unfair. It would appear that Merseyside police have had a rethink, for which I'm extremely grateful to them. So now there is 20 grand, cash free, in Reddy's, in your bin, for the person who provides the golden nugget, and they can ring Crime Stoppers anonymously, Merseyside police, the National Crime Agency, or me. I really don't mind. But he must be found, and he will be found. And the journey that I've been on for the last 23 months has been absolutely astonishing.
What are the 2 murders that he's connected to, that he's wanted for? What happened there?
The first victim is 16 years old, a child, a kid, Liam Kelly. Liam's picture is on there. You can find all these flyers online. If you want any of them, I'll contact me and I'll post you some so you can display or distribute them. Liam was 16, and it's fair to say no one has described him as a model student. Well, nor was I at 16. Liam was denied the opportunity to grow, to mature, to enter manhood, to find a life partner, to have a family, to settle down, to provide for him. He was denied all that because in the early hours, in June 2004, he was blasted to death with a shotgun over a 200 quid debt.
Yeah. And
3 people have been convicted in connection with Liam's crime, Liam's murder. But the court was told that Parle pulled the trigger, and he remains very much wanted for that crime.
So the person who pulled the trigger for that murder has not yet been found?
So a court was told. But let's just remember, Kevin Parle has not been tried for either of these crimes. Therefore, he is not convicted of them. I need to enforce that, because I don't want him getting captured, going to court, and then saying, Peter Bleksley gave loads of podcast interviews, and therefore I can't get a fair trial.
Yeah.
We don't want that happening. The second murder is of 22-year-old, mother of 3 young children, Lucy Hargreaves, who has been described to me as being as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside. People roundly adored her.
Mm-hmm.
And in August 2005, 3 men burst into her home. She was on the sofa and she was blasted to death with a shotgun. Her body and her home was then set on fire, and her partner and father of her 3 young children, who was upstairs in bed with their youngest, who was only 2 years old. The other 2 kids were with the grandparents. He escaped the blazing house by smashing a first-floor window and leaping out of the window together with his 2-year-old. His name is Gary Campbell. I have met Gary and spoken to him on a number of occasions. What I need to say is that the BBC commissioned a podcast about my hunt for Kevin Parle back in 2019, and it was released last year. It's called Manhunt: Finding Kevin Parle. It's available on all your regular platforms, predominantly BBC Sounds.
We'll put it all in the description. They can find all your stuff there.
Thank you. The podcast has been downloaded over 3 million times, won an award. It was BBC's #1 true crime pod of 2020.
Congratulations.
Thank you. As a result of that and my book, because I've also written a book about my hunt for Kevin Parle, which is very different from the podcast. My book is called Manhunt. That was published towards the end of last year. By the way, as I say, very different from the podcast, and many people have devoured both the pod and the book, because they're different things, and they've thoroughly enjoyed both. There's a lot in one that you don't get in the other. Our podcast is coming back. The BBC have commissioned further episodes, so we will be back. And between the first series of the pod going out and today, as I say, I've met Gary, and we have interviewed him, and that interview will feature when the podcast returns.
Wow.
And what I will say is, my great mate and podcast editor, a guy called Mark Sandell, has been a journalist all his working life. So he doesn't get shocked very easily by things. Yeah. And when we interviewed Gary for the podcast, Mark was at one end of the room, socially distanced and holding the microphone for Gary, and I was at the other end with my microphone. As Gary was telling us the horrific story of what happened that night, I could see that Mark was physically moved as Gary was giving his testimony. And I challenge anybody, when the pod returns and you hear it, I challenge anybody not to be deeply moved by Gary's tale of that dreadful evening. Yeah.
So in regards to Kevin Parle, again, not being convicted, so we don't know if it's him or not, so we can't say that. But how close are you? I said at the beginning, if you catch Kevin Parle, is that a when you catch Kevin Parle? And there's also been rumours of him potentially being dead or not, because it's been so long. So yeah, how close are you? How close have you been? And what do you make of the whole dead stuff?
Right. There has been a rumour circulating on Merseyside for a number of years now that Kevin Parle is dead. It's complete and utter nonsense. Okay? If you were wanted in connection with 2 separate murders, that is exactly the kind of rumour you would want being spread around. I have interviewed the man that I am told was responsible for starting that rumour. Okay? there are more holes in his story than there are in a calendar, right? Okay, right?
Swiss cheese.
Yeah, exactly. It's complete nonsense. Kevin Parle is alive.
Mm-hmm.
It's been one heck of a journey. I know, before lockdown restrictions were in place, we travelled to Liverpool many, many times, a city that I love, people that I adore. And we went to Spain, Manchester, Warrington, trips involving meetings in London and a few other places that I can't declare just at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been remarkable. Some wonderfully courageous people have come forward and continue to come forward and tell me what they know. I mean, on Merseyside, in certain circles, there is a kind of like a mindset that you do not grasp. You are born and raised in Liverpool to be told that you do not talk to the authorities, you do not grasp. Well, Lucy's murder crossed the line.
Mm-hmm.
It crossed the line, and people have spoken to me and continue to speak to me. And to those courageous people, I am extremely grateful. Keep it coming. Thousands of people have helped, and I would invite your audience to do the same, please.
Well, I was going to say, yeah. Well, you can follow you. We'll whack all your stuff there, so we can keep it in the description, so they can keep up to date with all that sort of stuff. But what can I and everyone watching this actively do to try and help you out in your hunt for him?
Yeah. Okay. You can message me. Okay. A DM, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Excuse me. Or LinkedIn. Sorry. Every time I mention LinkedIn, I fall asleep. Right. Sorry. So I'm across all of those platforms. You can contact me. I've got a website, peterbleksley.com. My surname is Bleksley, unusual spelling. peterbleksley.com. You can message me via that. I've got a burner phone, which is always on, 07908 617 694. So I could not be more contactable. You can have paper copies of the A4 poster and the A5 flyer. You can have electronic versions to share. You can follow me on all those previously mentioned social media platforms and retweet and share. And if you know a particular Facebook group, for example, that you think I could reach out to, I will send a message to them, any links, and ask them to engage. And I'll tell you why this is proving so helpful, right? About 3 weeks ago, somebody said, reach out to this Facebook group. They might help. And it's in the Costa Blanca. And I know that Parle has been in the Costa Blanca in Spain while he's been on the run. I've been to the Costa Blanca. You'll hear all about it in the podcast and the kind of conversations that I have with some people. And one is mildly amusing because they try to backtrack on what they say when they realise that they've made a bit of an error. Anyway, forgive me, where was I? Right, Spain, Facebook, yeah. So I reached out to this Facebook group, and one of the administrators was a lovely lady. She said, yes, Peter, create your post. You can join our group. We'll put it up there, and we're only too happy to help. That group had 11,000 members. So it's kind of sort of like a medium-sized group.
Yeah.
So I sent my post. It goes live, and a minute later, the administrator rings me. She says, Peter, something strange is going on here, she said. Your post has been up for a minute, and it's been shared 60 times. Okay, great. 24 hours later, my post had been shared over 1,200 times.
Wow.
It had a reach across that part of Spain of over 75,000 people.
Wow.
It had created such a stir that a head of a fugitive hunting unit in Spain contacted me directly and said, how can we help? So this is the kind of engagement that is shrinking the world for Kevin Parle. Day by day, every new person that hears about him, that listens to the pod, that buys my book, and this is not a profit-making thing, by the way. Let me tell you, okay, right? Certainly not for me. Might be for my publisher, but it ain't for me. And I'll tell you why. Because every penny in the last 23 months, okay, my work that has consumed me every day for Kevin Parle has earned me £13,000, right? So you know I'm not doing it for the money. And every penny of that has gone into the hunt. Planes, trains, automobiles, petrol, every coffee, every Coke, because when you're on the road, you've got to buy all your food and all your drink. Hotels. We've been on the road for months. The thousands I've spent in hotel bills, and trust me, I stay in budget hotels. You know what I mean? 40 quid a night where the shower curtain sticks to your back. You know, all that kind of stuff, right? But I don't care, and it's all for Liam and Lucy, because this is.
I was going to say, is that what motivates you to keep looking for him
all the time? Liam and Lucy. End of. That's who it's all about. It's not. It's most definitely not about me. And to an extent, it's not about Kevin Parle. It's about Liam and Lucy. Rest their souls. And I've made a solemn and public declaration that I simply will not stop.
Do you think he knows who you are?
Yeah. He's a very smart guy. Okay, so many people that we've met and interviewed who knew Kevin Parle from his school days, for example, and post school. Many people have said he is a smart guy. He's intelligent. He often used to think he was the smartest guy in the room, but on many occasions he actually was. So people have told me. So is he sitting now at a laptop with a traceable IP address watching your podcast? No. Is somebody doing that on his behalf? Probably. Because whenever I do something which might create a bit of a reaction, there is a reaction. And I'll give you some examples. In recent weeks, if you go to my Twitter, you'll see that I've posted moving images of Kevin Parle. One of my many people that helped with the hunt for him discovered an app where you could take a photograph and you could add eye movement, mouth movement, head movement, and all of that. And this person did this. There was another one, because I've heard that Parle had a full beard at some point whilst he's been on the run. Added a full beard, added movement to it.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, and some people thought these were like spooky. There was a bit of a reaction. I know when I say bit of a reaction, I don't mean that millions of people saw it, because I am a minor, lowercase Z-list public personality, nobody, right? But it creates a reaction. And whenever I do something like this, or if I post something on my website, which is kind of provocative, when I renamed it The People's Hunt for Kevin Parle, because it is the people that are doing this with me, there's a reaction. And I'll tell you what that reaction might be. My burner phone will ring continually at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, right? I will be absolutely deluged with phishing emails, or other kinds of scamming attacks.
And you think that's him, or people connected to him doing that?
It's no coincidence. Whenever I do something that is provocative, they get provoked. They hacked my website or something like that. They've tried to do that in the past. And so why are all these people doing this? Because they have his best interests at heart, because they are trying to distract me, and they will simply fail. I've had photographs of my house posted on social media.
Wow.
And on one occasion, there was an accurate description of the bedroom that I sleep in.
Oh.
Crack on, whoever you are, because you simply are not going to stop me.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If Kevin or the people around him are watching this, what would you say to him?
Well, to the people that are around him, I'd say this. He's going to get caught. Now, do you want to get nicked for harbouring him? Because if you do, you might be staring down the barrel of a jail term yourself. I know what you're up to, by the way. I know what you're doing. I know what your business is. And I know who's involved in it. Do I have the golden nugget of exactly where he's getting his head down tonight? No, I don't. No, I accept that. But I know what you're up to. So, you know, he's going to get captured. And you might get nicked as well. And consequently, the £20,000 reward may well go to somebody else. If he's going to get captured. Now, I can hear him laughing now at the thought of 20 grand because the industry and the level that they're operating at, 20 grand is like pocket money. But it's certainly not to me. Not that I'm up for it or anything like that. It's not going to happen. You know, why not cash in? Because he is going to get captured. There's an air of inevitability about that. So why not cash in 20 grand into the pot? You know, do what you want to do with it because he is going to get captured, and you can then maybe orchestrate a situation where you yourselves don't get caught. You know, let's all be grown up and gentlemanly and businesslike about it, or else it's going to create a lot of aggravation for you, I think.
And if somehow Kevin was watching this,
you're going to get caught. You know. Credit where it's due. 16 years on the run. Yeah, I somewhat begrudgingly doff my cap to you.
Yeah.
And that's where it ends. You need to stand in a court and answer the allegations that are made against you. It's that fundamental belief and trust in a criminal justice system that makes the world go round, not serving up gear and killing people.
Yeah. Well, Peter, I think you've got a voice as well. You've got a certain, there's a tone about you which is so it's capturing, it's engaging, and it's you know, I will certainly be continuing to follow your journey in the podcast and you know, on the lookout myself. If I ever spot him, ginger, shaved head with a little beard, then I'll make sure to give you a bell and and I'll be giving that 20 grand.
Listen, buddy, do not have a closed mindset about what he might look like now.
Yeah, true.
Okay?
True.
You know, keep an open mind. Plastic surgery may have been involved. So he may look, sorry, I'm old school, cosmetic surgery, I should say. I'm showing my age here, aren't I, everybody? Right? Cosmetic surgery may be involved. He may look different. He will struggle to disguise the fact that he's 6'5".
Yeah.
And he is known as Kev. They still call him Kev.
Well, guys, I hope you guys have enjoyed the episode. Peter, thanks so much for joining me in the sit down, pal. It's been a pleasure. Always someone that I wanted to get on, and then when you reached out on Twitter the other day, I thought, you know, what better time to do it. So thank you so much for coming on the show, pal. We'll whack all your stuff in the description. Make sure, you know, everyone will be able to check that out. And guys at home, I hope you guys have enjoyed that. And make sure, again, we'll put the number of the burner phone, of Peter's burner phone, in the description as well. But again, as he said, don't be closed off to the idea of what he looks like, because at some point one of us is going to spot him, right? It could be you. So be on the hunt out, look out, and stay tuned, guys. So you guys have enjoyed it, like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Ta-da. Cheers, Peter.
My pleasure, bud.